Powering the Future, Balancing Energy, Network Infrastructure, and AI. I'm pleased to introduce Mike Galvin, Chief Administrative Officer of Granite Telecommunications, Steve Hall, Environmental Manager, Williams Company, Carol Lane, Vice President, Governor's X Energy, Alan Poole, General Counsel, DC Blocks, and Asim Raza, Vice President, General Counsel, Arcadian Infracom. So welcome everyone, please have a seat. Well, it was good to start with Congressman Latta, Chairman Latta, because the work that he'll be doing and the work that the Energy and Commerce Committee really symbolizes everyone on this, or captures everyone on this panel, and the work that we're all trying to do together. What I'd like to do is have everyone just introduce yourself real quickly, your company, the work that you're doing, and then I'll ask y'all a few questions. So Mike, you can start and we'll go down the way.
Great. Thanks, Chip, and appreciate it. My name is Mike Galvin. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of Granite Telecommunications. Granite provides voice and data services to national businesses and governmental agencies, including some in Bowling Green, Ohio. Looking forward to the discussion about the way AI is affecting us and our customers. Thank you.
Steve?
Oh, is it? We'll trade for a minute. Yeah. Good morning. My name's Steve Hall. I'm with Williams Companies. We're a national natural gas pipeline infrastructure company. And I too am based in Ohio. So the chairman just gave all of my talking points. You did a great job, and we're very much interested in all of the things he's talking about. Permitting reform is key to me. I'm an environmental manager for the company. I manage environmental permitting throughout the Northeast, and I've been in the permitting space for over 30 years for all kinds of energy. And even though we've developed a lot of new technologies and science behind it, the process and the policies are certainly not keeping up with our science and our innovation in that space. So that's the key topic for us.
Carol?
Good morning. I'm Carol Lane, Vice President of Government Affairs for X Energy. X Energy is a advanced nuclear energy company, small modular reactors, if you will. We're a Generation 4 reactor, meaning we don't have water in our reactor core. We're a high temperature gas cooled reactor, which has some increased safety features and flexibility and reliability in terms of the way it can be deployed. We have a major contract with the Department of Energy under the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. So we'll be deploying our first reactor in partnership with Dow Chemical in Seadrift, Texas. And then last year, we just ended up into a partnership with Amazon for our second plant, which will be in the state of Washington, and further deployment out through 2039.
Alan?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Alan Poole. I'm General Counsel for DC Blocks. DC Blocks is a vertically integrated digital infrastructure developer, owner, and operator. We develop data centers, fiber networks to connect those data centers, and also cable landing stations. We have a cable landing station in Myrtle Beach. Our footprint runs from South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and is quickly growing. The data centers we build are the cloud. They are what is going to make AI work. And we are, at least we feel, we're at the center of all this convergence, trying to build the infrastructure necessary to fuel the AI revolution and the advanced jobs of tomorrow.
Awesome.
Good morning. Alan, I got to tell you, what one lawyer on a panel is fine. If you put two, I feel like we're getting targeted. So that may not be a good thing. Asim Raza. Asim rhymes with possum. You'll never forget it now. Vice President, General Counsel at Arcadian Infracom. I oversee the legal department and government relations. Arcadian is a digital infrastructure company headquartered in St. Louis. We are in a partnership with the state of California right now, building out part of their middle mile network. So a lot of scaling up in the past year, but a lot of the issues that we've talked about today pertain to us.
Yesterday, a number of the people on the panel met with key congressional staff. It was a great conversation. We had 3 roundtables. One was, how do you have an all of the above AI strategy? So open source to closed proprietary. So an abundance approach and strategy on AI. But if you think about it, it's very consistent with INCOMPAS's history from the very beginning, where we were open networks, open markets and competition in telecommunications and technology, an open internet to expand and have the greatest commercial economic growth through the commercial internet. And now an open source, open competition on all AI models. So that was on one stack. But in the next conversation, it was, how do you have an all of the above fiber and broadband and data center and energy infrastructure, what I call the AI infrastructure? How do you speed the deployment? If you think historically, during World War II, we had the race to a nuclear weapon, and during that time, we built the energy labs at Sandia, Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and it was a federal, all of government, national imperative. During the Cold War, we had the space race to put a man on the moon, and so we built the NASA infrastructure from Houston, my home state, the Stennis Space Center, Alabama, my neighbor at Huntsville, and then Cape Canaveral. And how did we, build the infrastructure to put a man on the moon? This revolution and this race with China on AI is primarily privately funded, and the private infrastructure and the private investment combined with historic federal funding on the broadband and infrastructure side. So how do we win this race? How do we, in this moment, win what will be not only important for our national security, but for the economic, international competitiveness, the education, the workforce, something that will probably be more profound and more pervasive than the internet. And our companies are on the forefront of that. And what we've built with the AI Center is something very unique. We have the only association that has all of the substack or all of the ecosystem represented. And that's what makes us different and distinct, and I think more effective as we meet with members of Congress and their staff. So Mike, as we lay that groundwork for the age we're in and the race that we're running, what do you think from Granite's perspective is the most important on the policy front and on the private sector side that we can all be working together to do?
Thanks, Chip. Yeah, there's obviously a lot to this that is going to have to be resolved in the next coming weeks, months, years. In our view, in the types of customers that we serve, thinking about an AI future, it's really imperative to us that there is a connected future. Customers that we serve run the gamut from largest companies in the world, Fortune 100 companies, but they have locations like some in Ohio where the connection doesn't exist. And I thought the chairman's remarks were really insightful about the types of small businesses that need to be connected, the schools and libraries, the public health facilities, that to the extent there's a connection today, it's often an analog or copper connection that doesn't provide the type of speed, the type of ability to provide a full range of services. So we see it across the board for companies with rural areas, for governmental agencies. Granite is fortunate enough to be a supplier to numerous federal agencies. Customs and Border is a customer of ours. The post office, where we're providing SD-WAN services in small and rural communities. And at about 25% of those locations, there's a lack of connectivity. And so that cuts across a lot of the programs that we're going to be discussing today. I know that there'll be panels on BEAD. I suspect that copper retirement issues will arise. USF issues to provide support for schools and libraries and other agencies that support both on state and local levels. These are all really critical policies to an evolving AI ecosystem that works for all. We think that the BEAD funding has been something that we've been pushing, and think it's a great idea. Frankly, I'm concerned that one of the ways to speed BEAD is not to rewrite the rules and not to require states. Louisiana and other states have been on the forefront of it. We think it's to keep going and to get the services implemented and stood up, so that increasingly all of the locations in the U.S. Have more connection, less underserved or unserved areas, in the ability to connect to the internet is something that we're going to remain proponents of.
Steve, you're building both pipelines and sometimes fiber routes along your routes, and you cross multiple states in the process. How long does it take you to build and to permit a new pipeline?
That's a great question. It will often take us, say, 9 months on average to build an interstate pipeline project. Maybe 6 to 12 months, depending on the scope and scale of the project. But it can take us often a minimum of 3 years to permit that same project, and sometimes up to 5 years. And it is, it's a complicated process. It's very complex reviews by multiple federal state agencies, overlapping jurisdictions and interest. And so from our perspective, permitting reform, again, as the chairman said, is critical for us to be able to deliver that infrastructure at much more the speed of business.
Do we need a more national framework and a place for some preemption to speed and accelerate, and possibly a more certain time frame for permitting and also judicial review? Are those the things that you're talking to members of Congress about?
Absolutely. What we have commonly run into is the 401 water quality certification component of the Clean Water Act can hold up a pipeline project when one state doesn't have the ability to limit the development of a project across multiple states. The judicial review process is critical to our success because of an extremely litigious environment that we've encountered out there, and the NEPA process as a whole really is being weaponized in a number of respects.
You know, as we look at the data center, and we'll talk in a little bit more, but yeah, we had New Leaf Energy as a renewable energy yesterday on a roundtable, and how natural gas and renewables work together in many ways to provide both the reliability, the redundancy, and the supply. Many people think in the future, new nuclear, small modular nuclear reactors, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now can be a great component of our energy supply. X-Energy did a major deal with Amazon, one of our member companies in Northern Virginia. Talk about that, and talk a little bit about your technology. And for those of you who have not gone to a SMR demonstration, it takes a reactor that, you know, if you think in the old world is this huge mammoth structure of concrete, like a Russian doll, of one layer of concrete and another layer of concrete and another layer. The new nuclear reactors are the size of a school bus that are then put together. And so much like our iPhone took a huge supercomputer during the space race that filled up the Houston Command Center, and now it's in the palm of your hand. The new nuclear reactors are much smaller and safer. Talk about the technology and what it takes to get to market.
Thanks for that question. I would like to recognize, and I'm sorry Mr. Latter had to leave, but he, as we talk about infrastructure, he has been such a key proponent, and this is going back about 5 years ago. We had not built, other than the reactors that just got online in Georgia, we haven't built new nuclear in about 30 years, and the supply chain and the fuel supply has really dwindled. And Mr. Latta was one of the few people, core people in Congress, that recognized the need for new fuel facilities. The thing that's unique about these small modular reactors, as I said, particularly the Generation 4 ones, and there's about 4 or 5 different technologies, probably 6 to about 12 different companies that are trying to deploy these kind of reactors, all use enriched fuel that's a little bit higher than what's used in the current fleet of reactors. We have zero capability to do that in this country. We were on a path to import this higher enrichment from Russia, and obviously that path is closed down. But going back 5 years ago, Mr. Latta recognized this. He's been the leader in trying to get the fuel supply built in this country. And that's been, in terms of the lead time, in terms of getting new reactors and new nuclear online, that is a major issue. And he's really pushed it and has been a major player in trying to get new reactors deployed. So with that, and I left my prop in my briefcase, but basically, I know it's right over there. Basically, our fuel is the size of a billiard ball, and the uranium is contained in that. Weighs about the same, and we call them pebbles. Those pebbles go into the reactor core, about 220,000 of them. And as Chip said, you can think of a school bus turned vertically with 220,000 of these pebbles in there. And we flow inert helium over the pebbles. The helium heats up, goes through the steam generator and the turbines, and produces either high quality steam or electricity. So very different technology. What this allows us to do is have a smaller footprint. So where we can locate nuclear reactors becomes a different ballgame. Because we tend to have 4 reactors to a plant, we have a very, very high reliability, which is one of the things that attracted both Dow and Amazon to our particular technology. So we have 4 reactors to a plant. So that means we don't have to shut all the one reactor. If we're doing maintenance on one reactor, we have 3 reactors that are still working. We can load follow. So that gives some flexibility to the grid in terms of working with renewables. And we don't need to be located near water. And so those are key features that really change the dynamics of the applicability of nuclear, that we haven't really been able to use it before. That's not to say, with the growth that we're looking at in the rest of this decade in the 2030s, we obviously have a huge demand for energy. We're going to need all kinds of power to make that happen. But particularly with the growth in data centers and AI and their locations and how they use the electricity, I think nuclear will be a major provider of that electricity in the 2030s.
So next is the reason or the cause of all of this new energy demand and revolution, DC blocks. As you try to land new data centers all through the Southeast and maybe new subsea landing cables, is energy the number one question for everyone chasing power? And where there's power, before you can build a data center, and then talk a little bit about your fiber needs and how much fiber your data center needs. You're building your own fiber, but do you also count on other people to build fiber for you?
Sure, absolutely. The briefest summary I can give of how we look at new sites and judge whether it's going to be a good opportunity is four things in order of importance: power, cost of land, availability of incentives, tax incentives usually, and fiber connectivity. It really boils down to that. Power is of paramount importance because of the amount of need that modern AI-ready data centers will require because of the density of computing power within a particular square footage increases heat, which requires cooling. Somewhere in there, and it kind of moves depending on where you are, is availability of water. But that's difficult to make a generalization because every data center is pretty different when it comes to how much water it needs. From our standpoint on the power side, as a developer that's not quite as big as a Microsoft or an Amazon, we go to utility companies and inquire about how much power is available. And many of the issues we'll be discussing are such as permitting for pipelines, power interconnection queues, federal policy. It's basically the infrastructure of the infrastructure we rely on. Slowdowns in transmission upgrades are what cause our utility partners to say things like, we have this much power available in 2035, or more and more. Utility companies are requiring significant credit assurances to weed out the real projects from the fake. And to be fair, there are a lot of fake data center projects out there just to get in the news or to attract investors. But that puts a big burden on competition in the data center space. The cost of doing business is not increasing quite at the same rate as the power needs, but it's going in the same direction. And that risks stratifying the data center developer market into the haves and have-nots. We have a lot of creative ways of getting around that. One of the things that we really rely on is dedication to our local communities, being connected, being good partners, being transparent, and also giving back. But it is the biggest hill to get over right now. We feel very positive that the amount of private investment that's driving this is going to help us get over the hump. I remember hearing a year ago when the power conversation switched from we have enough generation, but transmission's a problem, to, well, now generation is a problem. We heard from many of our partners, we're not waiting. We're going to do R&D on SMRs, other types of alternative fuel sources. So I think we're going to get there. And on a broader note, this crunch for easily available power is basically, not intentionally, but creating the space race of alternative energy sources. So I think, although we're having some issues now, we will end up in a really amazing place in 10 years that's going to benefit not just data centers, but the world as a whole. For fiber connectivity, you know how I mentioned we like cheap land, we like cheap power, we like tax incentives. So you could go in the middle of nowhere and find land that's dirt cheap and there's power available and build it. If you don't have fiber, you just have a giant refrigerator. So you can't forget the fiber. We'll be talking a lot about the BEAD Act, and I think it's important to provide context for how that affects what we do. When you talk about BEAD, many stakeholders would rightly point out that BEAD is primarily for residential and business end users. That's not really the type of fiber that we use. So at first glance, it might seem BEAD might have nothing to do with data centers or AI, but that couldn't be further from the case for a couple of reasons. The most obvious reason is to make sure everybody in the country can benefit from a rapidly changing and transforming world and workplaces, they are going to need to have high-speed internet connection. Additionally, the BEAD funding mechanism is going to increase the availability of middle mile and long haul dark fiber in a couple of ways. One, some of the builds will necessarily need to construct or lease that type of facility. The other way is that's actually kind of the same thing, but it's going to increase the availability of long haul and middle mile fiber, which is ultimately going to increase the amount of places where data centers are viable. And I think it's going to make the market even more competitive over time.
Alan, thank you. And awesome. As we talk about dark fiber, long haul fiber routes that Arcadian, your company, is building. And as we look at BEAD in this conversation, should states have the flexibility to use any excess BEAD funding that has primarily been dedicated to last mile connectivity to the home and to the business? But also, is there a place like in Texas where they're using BEAD for middle mile, or what we call AI connectors or AI corridors, connecting the data centers? And just talk about why you think that might be important. You're building in a lot of rural, sparsely populated areas and building to data centers. Would BEAD be helpful in the investment that you're making to connect those hubs that will become hubs of research, hubs of manufacturing, and hubs of centered around the data center?
Thank you. Yes, BEAD is an incredibly important part of this process. And the way that we talk about fiber is that BEAD is really the last mile, right? So that's the retail operation. That's connecting people's homes. But, if you looked at the road system, the last mile is really that connectivity in your suburb, in your local area. But if you don't have the interstate highway system in place, really you're not connecting anything. And that's why it's incredibly important to have long haul routes available. And I think that excess funding from BEAD that's available really should be reinvested into that long haul aspect that's going to be able to connect the data centers together. And the more that you've got the ability to route those long haul places into rural America, that's really where you have the opportunity to place those data centers. And the ability to spread data centers around, not just to the typical markets, but all across the country, really does allow for an equitable approach to data centers, because with that comes the economic benefit associated with it. So I think for the country, the best thing to do is to really make sure that we've got an appropriate distribution of the long haul fiber that helps build these data centers.
I'll just give you an example. Zayo, one of our member companies, built a long haul dark fiber route between Atlanta to Dallas, and then from New Orleans to Chicago. And it just so happened to intersect at Jackson, Mississippi. And when that happened, it was the last piece of the puzzle that allowed AWS to make the largest investment in Mississippi history, which is now going to be around $20 billion, 1 gig of power, the largest local tax and state tax revenue stream back to the local communities because of the data center. And then what it enables for the rest of the state to become a research hub, hopefully an advanced manufacturing hub, really changed the dynamics in a state like Mississippi. The thing that is, so dark fiber enabled that. Power enabled that. But that is an example that you could say is going to happen in Ohio, in South Dakota, in North Dakota, in New Mexico, and all through the country. And so our gas pipelines, our transmission grids, our dark fiber routes, connecting all of those now possible more rural, remote locations, and what that will do to the economy of each of those areas where a major data center lands is really going to be transformational. So what we're talking about is how do we build that as fast as possible? How do we use our public funding as wisely as possible? And how do we change our permitting that takes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to maybe 1, 2, 3 years? And so how do we cut everything in half to speed this deployment? And that's what we'll be talking to members of Congress about. What I'd like to do is give a quick opportunity for everybody. If Congress and the new administration could do 1 to 2 things to help each of your businesses, what would that 1 to 2 things be? Mike?
So probably the things I touched on before, allow the BEAD to continue. It's been implemented. States spend a lot of time devising plans and policies. Would really love it to make it be. It's great to talk. We need funding to be released, to networks to be built, for communities to be connected. So the BEAD to proceed. Second, we really would love to see a better solution for USF. We get schools and libraries, small users. There's uncertainty in the courts, uncertainty on the Hill about how that program is going to be funded. Businesses need time to plan. And so I guess that would be a second that we would choose.
One last question, Mike. So you have one of the major government contracts on trying to modernize telecommunication services in the U.S. government. We have DOGE looking at how to be more cost efficient and effective. Is procurement reform and acquisition reform, is that something that could also be helpful just from how government can be much faster, more efficient, more cost effective?
For sure. In the private sector, we've sold on efficiency and savings. It's been a tough sell for a long period of time on governmental agencies on savings. Oftentimes, lower price is viewed not as a positive, but where things are today, I think large and mid-sized and even small federal agencies are re-examining that approach to look for savings. The good news is you can get a more modern, a better connection for half the price often, and that's the type of efficiency that we hope to bring to the federal agencies as well.
Steve, your turn next, and everything from permitting to tax policy, whatever you want to try to tackle.
We could have fun with that, but we'll keep it brief. Permitting reform is key. Interstate projects need to have the water quality certification process through 401 under FERC so that we have a comprehensive approach and we don't get hung up with individual states. We need judicial reform. As soon as we get those permits, we very often have immediately filed lawsuits questioning the federal determinations and decisions, and it further delays the process, and we need some judicial certainty of the process in the courts. And NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, has become a bit complex and convoluted and has many overlapping policies and guidance documents that makes for a very confusing process. So some NEPA reform is also key to success.
You know, every now and then in American history, you'll have moments of disruption where everything changes for good or bad. And we're not yet sure what's going to happen. But this is a period of change, and it's a period of action. And so as I listen to everyone, and these are big things that we have to tackle, and hopefully our association and our members can be part of good disruption and good change, and to give the good advice on how we can sustainably reform how we make decisions as a nation and build things. So I'm hoping that as we have this conversation and we take it to the Hill and to the policymakers, that we can play that role. Carol, I have to say, I don't know if I ever thought when I became CEO of INCOMPAS that I would have a nuclear company in my membership. What are the things that can help you get to market faster?
So I'd say on the Congress in terms of SMRs has really been what I would call policy forward. And by that, I mean that they've really been working on these issues for the past 5-6 years. And, I think they were actually ahead of the energy and AI demand. What I saw back then was more of a technology push. And what I'm seeing now is a market pull. So the 2 demonstration programs that the Department of Energy funded was in 2020. And the challenge right now is we're about halfway through them. We're starting and entering the steep part of the curve in terms of long lead procurements and going through the licensing process and things like that. So our costs are ramping up. As most of you who deal with Congress know, they tend to like incremental funding increases. And so we really need to not back away. We've made a decision, the Congress has been funding these programs. We need to get them to get to deployment. When we talk to investors, when we talk to utilities, when we talk to other customers, the number one thing they say is, you haven't built one yet. We've got to get the first ones built. Amazon, which has made a significant contribution or investment, I should say, into X Energy and into their future with us in terms of deployment of nuclear reactors, it is all predicated on getting the first one built. So that's our number 1, number 2, and number 3 priority. But second to that is the Loan Program Office, the DOE, is very important. And tying in with what I just said, there's a lot of skepticism within the investment community in terms of once we get through number 1, that we can still build number 2, 3, and 4 and approximately on cost and on schedule. That's not the history of the nuclear industry. And so reducing those early risks for maybe the first 3, 4, whatever number that is, to demonstrate that we can build these economically is really important. And then the third policy issue is the clean energy tax credits, putting nuclear on an equal footing with the renewable tax credits. If I could just go back one more time on the demonstration program, it is a 50-50 cost share program today, so the government isn't totally funding it. So for every dollar the government puts in, we have to go raise $1 to be able to support that program.
Thank you, Carol. And I know Paula Boyd with Microsoft is here. Microsoft made a major commitment to 3 Mile Island. And as you look at our companies driving this energy investment and connection and across the board, and again, it goes back to the data centers. So Alan, not that you're the place where everything meets. What do you have permitting siting issues that affect how data centers can build and construct, and any other policy issues that you think could be helpful?
It's interesting coming to, being a smaller operator and coming to a conference that focuses on larger federal issues, because most of our issues are very local. Zoning with local communities, there can be significant pushback to data centers due to perceived issues with noise, misguided ideas that we're going to cause the grid to go down when in fact we make it stronger. The idea of doing something federally, though, to override community choice is something we'd be hesitant to support, because we, want to be good partners. We like working with communities. We think that if we keep going the course we're going as far as our local partners are concerned, it'll become apparent how important all of this is, whether that's for making jobs available to your constituents or, getting the fantastic increase in property tax rules. We had one legislator in Georgia who was sponsoring legislation to increase the cost of energy for us, while at the same time when somebody else brought up maybe getting rid of tax incentives, he said, absolutely not. We were able to build new schools thanks to data centers. So, the proof's in the pudding there. But when it comes to federal policy on the energy side, I'd say beyond what's already been discussed, the most important thing from my perspective is getting through this period of uncertainty that we're in right now as quickly as possible. We had a local utility partner not get a gigantic federal loan or distribution, I can't remember which. And that kind of stuff can really rattle the market. Just as an example, a much smaller issue in Georgia last year, they passed a law getting rid of sales and use tax exemptions that we need to be able to pass on to our customers so that they can invest in high cost, high tech equipment. Most states that compete for data centers have that, by the way. That got vetoed, which is great. But the mere activity, even though that law never went into effect, you talk to anybody who develops in Georgia, they'll probably tell you that we lost a year of development due to that. There's tons of uncertainty in the markets, not just because of what's going on with the government, but because of what's going on with the technology. We're not sure, there are operators out there that are still trying to figure out exactly how they're going to tackle this, and there's no one right answer. So if the federal government wants to make a commitment to AI, they need to take a holistic view of everything they're doing and not throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to existing grants, existing programs that may be unpopular. I would just, I would hope that the federal government would take a second look and try and get us through this very interesting time quickly.
Awesome.
Well, I think the analogy you made earlier, Chip, about we're in a race right now with China, right? And I think that you almost want to look at it the way permitting is that you're in a race from New Orleans to Oregon, and China's in a speedboat, and we're in an ocean liner. And that's how difficult it is to be able to get things done. So I think if you were to start focusing on certain parameters when it comes to permitting, shot clocks, for instance, one shop fits all, right? Like a whole government concept where you could go to one place to get these permits and quickly turning them, that's eventually going to get us to a point where we're not being so burdened to not be able to compete in this race. I think, oddly enough, I spent 11 years as the chief legal officer at a railroad, so I understand what that process is like. But learning how to deal with private industry and how to make it so that these things, the railroad bill that you're talking about, is how to get dealing with private industry to turn these applications around quickly is extremely important, because every bit of delay really does kill this ultimate race. And if China's not burdened with the same things that we are here, it's a race that can't be won. So I think that the mindset has to be that we can't afford to lose this. And you're talking right now about reducing the federal workforce. I'll tell you, as dealing with federal permitting, it's hard enough as it is, but if you don't have the people there and you lose a lot of institutional knowledge, there's going to be ramifications for that.
Let me just say, or add something to what Chairman Latta closed with. INCOMPAS brings the entire ecosystem of communications, technology, infrastructure, now energy, into the room where policymakers are trying to learn and trying to make the right decisions. And he talked about how he appreciated that we're able to bring that type of coalition, which is distinct. Every other association is you have cable, you have wireless, you have broadcasters, you have every industry that is just solely focused on their narrow interest. And we're able to bring, and this panel really represents the new coalition building the new infrastructure for the new technology to bring new competition across all platforms and all sectors. And it's much more compelling when you can bring this table or this group to a table in Washington. And so I'm very proud of what we've been able to assemble on our membership. The AI Center, Mike, I want to thank you for the seed capital to get us started. And the lesson that we have learned historically and what we saw yesterday on Capitol Hill and today is that this is an effective means of achieving the influence and the outcomes that are important to our nation's best interest and national security and our economic competitiveness and for the education and the workforce of the future. So I want to thank everybody on this panel, thank our membership and board and the commitment to build something that nobody else has built. So thank you all.